Welcome to Small Town Snarks. I'm Joel.
And I'm Miranda. Let's get snarky.
Hey, Miranda.
Hey, Joel.
Welcome back to Small Town Snark.
Yeah, let's get snarky today.
Let's get snarky today. Gosh, do we have a fun show to talk about?
We do. Should we just briefly recap where we are in life right now?
Yeah, we've got a lot to debrief. Oh gosh, we've done a couple shows last couple weeks. We've got
just did a cabaret.
We sure did do a cabaret.
Yeah.
Love a good love song. Good show tune. Good medley. Good group of performers. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
And then we've got Beetlejuice Jr.
On the horizon.
It's coming.
It's happening.
Yeah,
it's happening.
Lots of crazy stuff.
Lion King's a couple of weeks away.
Yeah.
Time's a-flying.
It is.
It is.
Well.
Yeah.
Shall we get into it?
We should.
All right. So, today we are talking about basically how Grease happened and the origins of that.
Yeah.
And I think to start off, one of the things to keep in mind that we touched on the last episode is after all of the drama with my senior year of high school and putting on the production of High School Musical, I was feeling a little petty, I'll be honest. I was, 18, feeling a little bit petty. And that's part of how Grease happened, because our drama teacher mentioned that she would never do Grease. So that's one of the reasons I picked the show is, I was feeling those emotions, and I was like, not only do I want to do this with my friends, but I want to do something that she would never do. And part of the reason she didn't like Grease in particular is the messaging at the end, which I can understand. But I always like to point out that people often forget that at the end, Danny also shows up in, a different costume, showing that he's changing for Sandy. And then, we kind of forget about all that, and we're like, oh, Sandy's hot, and we're just going to go with this route. So I understand why people think it's questionable, but I guess to get into this discussion a little bit of older shows and seeing the value in them, there are certain shows, and I think Grease is one of them, where there's more good than bad.
Of course.
And it's worth presenting, and definitely worth having a conversation, especially if you bring your child to the show. Worth having a conversation afterwards of, do you agree with what Sandy did? How did that make you feel? And all those things, and kind of exploring that. But there's a lot of interesting storylines, particularly with Rizzo. Her whole storyline is very interesting, especially for the time, and it's got some great music. Now, there are other shows, and I would use How to Succeed as an example, just for me personally. Sure. Where I feel like the good does not outweigh the bad, and maybe we should retire it. But, that being said, I'm sure people disagree, and they see good in it. So, yeah, it was an interesting first show choice. And as we get into it, we'll discuss more. I wasn't quite prepared for the production level it was going to take. There are a lot of costumes and a lot of set pieces. And in hindsight, I think it would have been beneficial for us to choose a production that wasn't as much of a spectacle, because creating those aspects when you're first starting out is a daunting process for sure. But yeah, that was definitely part of why that show was chosen.
I love that you share that, because I think there's such a conversation in theater and community theater especially of why it's important to tell stories, also how subject matter can be presented in a way that is constructive and educational for the audience. And I know we've had numerous conversations about this of there's very few places like a theater to help present those stories in a very tolerable and very understanding way that can open up a dialogue. And I think that's one of the things about Grease of there are some subjects that are addressed in that show that aren't, they're they can be controversial for some people, and some people may feel uncomfortable with them, but there's not really, it's a really great opportunity to share that story, have that conversation, and present it in a way that is informative and open for the audience to, either learn that or, understand that topic a little bit better. So I think that was always my favorite thing that I knew about with you selecting Grease and knowing that, backstory there was that, there are so many shows you could pick. There are so many opportunities and avenues to go down, and picking that show and tackling that subject matter head on and just going with it was really impressive. And then, of course, that conversation about older shows and presenting them and finding new ways to present them that are intentional, I feel like that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But it's
for sure.
That's such a good perspective though with Grease. So I was super excited when I heard that you were doing Grease as your first show, which
yeah, it was definitely ambitious and no regrets there. I was actually planning on doing Heathers originally because I loved the show. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was working at McDonald's and I was on my lunch break, and I saw that we didn't get the rights to Heathers, and I was just like, what does this mean? Because I hadn't done this before, and I didn't quite realize you could just not get the rights to something. Like, I thought you applied and you just get it and you pay for it, which 9 times out of 10 is what happens. But I didn't quite put that together, and I remember emailing them just being like, why is this happening? And they were like, oh, well, there's a group in your area that's doing it, so you can't do it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when shows are newer, they're more restricted.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what was happening there. But after that, I had started listening to the Broadway revival cast recording of Grease and just kind of got hooked on it. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. And as I was listening to it, I kind of started visualizing what I would do at the show. And I remember I was at the gym in college just listening to it, and I started getting really excited about it. Mm-hmm. And my roommate was just kind of like, you seem really excited about this. And I was like, I am. Like, This is a lot of fun. And the idea that I didn't have to stop doing theater with my friends after high school was very appealing. Like, not that many people get that opportunity.
Sure.
A lot of times it's you do it in high school and then you stop. Mm-hmm. So that was a big thing. And I remember even, like, our friend Brooks, we were in creative writing class senior year, and we actually had talked about potentially doing Grease in particular, and this was before I pivoted to Heathers and then back to Grease, but we had talked about it, and we actually, in that room, created, like, a dream cast. And at that time, the original concept was we'll pay to do this show, and we'll just, like, get our friends together and assign roles. And obviously it turned into creating a theater company, holding open auditions, and, like, that type of, like, a way more professional
laying a foundation
aspect.
Yeah.
But originally it was just, like, this passion project idea that we had, and it was fun to daydream that, oh, maybe we could do a show with our friends and we could actually be in control of it, and we wouldn't have to give this up after high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point, too, of, like, you talk about applying for rights, and I know this is a conversation we still have to this day of, like, what shows are available? How can we get the shows? And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about a lot, is that it's not easy to just get your dream show. If we could get our dream show, we'd be doing the hottest show on Broadway right now all the time. So, like, that had to have been something really... It probably hurt initially, but now that you've kind of gotten into the rhythm with it, you know where to kind of set your expectations and what to look out for in the community, and being aware of those other shows that are happening to, kind of plot your path forward. But I love that it was such, like, a long process for you of, like, you knew you wanted to do Grease, or you knew that it was in the back of your mind so early on, and then just letting that kind of end up guiding you and, like I said, laying that foundation for the company.
Yeah.
How was that process of, like, where did you go from there after you had decided that Grease was the one that you wanted?
That's the word.
Yes.
Well, actually, really briefly, interesting tangent on that.
Uh-huh.
When I applied for the licensing, and I was new at this, so I didn't realize this wasn't normal, but you actually had to apply for separate license for Helplessly Devoted to You, and You're the One That I Want.
Oh,
They
because they
didn't
weren't
come with the
included with the
show.
show. Oh,
So
interesting.
you had to purchase them separately.
Okay.
And which I decided to purchase both. Especially You're the One I Want. I feel like it's a staple.
It's iconic for the show.
Honestly, both of them are. So that was interesting. They also didn't tell you where to put it in the show.
Oh.
So I think like Hopelessly Devoted, we decided was going to end our Act 1.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't a lot of guidance on where to put it, which I thought was really interesting.
For sure.
But I even remember I saw a community theater production of Grease when I was in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting there and they didn't have You're the One That I Want. And I was like, what is this? Where's the song?
The song.
Yeah.
It's even more,
song.
like, I would say it's probably more well-known than the name song.
Yes.
It starts the show. I mean, that's,
100%.
yeah.
It's iconic. So that was a no-brainer for me. But in terms of what happened next, so in order to apply for the rights, I needed a venue. So
Oh, yes.
I started looking for venues, and our original home base was Frederick. So I started looking for venues in Frederick, Maryland. Couldn't really find anything. And there's a lot of arts in Frederick.
Oh, yes.
A lot. And not so much anymore, but definitely at the time, it was almost like a renaissance period of arts in Frederick. So it was really hard to get in there, especially as someone who's new. So I ended up finding the Carroll Arts Center, which is in Carroll County. I was like, it's 45 minutes from my house. That's fine. And I went to visit and check it out. And I remember we went in, me and my original team went in there. And we were so excited because it felt like a real theater.
Yeah.
And it's a small space, but there's no doubt it feels like a theater when you're in there.
Very unique space.
For sure.
Uh-huh.
And we were backstage, we're like, this is plenty of room. And you and I both know now that their backstage space it's tight. Especially with a spectacle show.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Good luck to you. But I remember when I was there, I found out that in order to book the venue, I needed to have insurance. So that was another thing.
Oh, yeah.
So my mom actually helped me with that because a lot of insurance companies didn't want to insure a brand new theater company.
Right.
And she found one company that would do it, and that is the company we use today.
Hey.
But yeah, she was super helpful with that. And after I locked in the venue, which was $200 an hour, with 18-year-old college student, that's a lot of money. And I remember being like, we only need 2 tech rehearsals. We're going to be great. It's going to be fine. So I only reserved it for 2 days. And I applied for the license with the venue. And I remember my grandparents were picking me up from school when I got the approval. But I got the approval, and it was with a caveat. And the licensing company called me, and they basically said, hey, we don't know if you're serious about this, so you have to pay the full amount up front.
What?
And normally, you only have to put down a deposit to secure the show. So you put down a deposit, you've got the show, you can start holding auditions, whatever. But they were like, you have to pay the whole thing. And the licensing was over $3,000. And I remember telling my grandparents, yeah, I got it, and I'm excited, but I have to pay all this money up front, blah, blah, blah. And when they dropped me off at my house, they, pulled me aside, and they handed me a check, and it was for the licensing amount. And they basically were like, hey, this is an investment in you and your future. And it definitely meant a lot to know that they believed in me and were willing to support me in that way.
Sure.
And there's no question, people sometimes think that I inherited the money to do all this, and that's not...
You didn't?
No, I worked at Taco Bell and McDonald's and saved almost everything I had. But, that being said, I don't want to mislead people in the fact that I definitely had support. And that was one of the instances where they supported me in getting the licensing. And that being said, I did put a lot of personal money into it, but the fact that I had family that was willing to do that for me was huge. I mean, I didn't know if this was going to become anything. I didn't know if it was going to be like a one-off passion project type thing. But I think at the time, it made a lot of sense for me because like I said, I was 18. I had savings from my fast food jobs. But I didn't have anything to lose. It's like, if I lose the savings, it is what it is. Now in life, I have a mortgage and I have bills, I have pets, I have a husband, we have car payments. Like, there's all these things that we're responsible for. And I feel like when I was younger, people were kind of like, why is this girl doing this? She's basically a kid. And while I understand that perspective, it was definitely the right move for me because at the most risky time of that whole process, I had nothing to lose. And I feel like the longer you wait and the more you have to lose, the less likely you are to pursue that. So the fact that we're here in this position where, we do have bills, but we have a stable company that I don't have to dump my personal money into is amazing. I mean, that's just like, very exciting.
I mean, it's that initial investment and support that you got from them, in addition to the money that you had put together, that, it allowed you to do Grease, but it continues to allow you to do everything that you're still doing today.
Right.
And when you, paint that picture of, you're in a different situation now than you were 9 years ago or 10 years ago when you were really starting out with the company, 100%. That like now that you made all those decisions at that point, it's still going to this day and It's still rolling, and that's just inspiring and really impressive.
Yeah, definitely. And we weren't even a nonprofit at the time. I didn't know how to become a nonprofit. There were...
It's not something they teach you in school.
No, they don't. And, even the venue we had, we would have gotten a significant discount if we were a nonprofit. But you also have to have a history of business to become a nonprofit. We didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
So I remember my college, I was in the honors college at my school, and they had this grant program. And this was mainly for people to study abroad. But the argument of this grant program was... you would apply, and it had to be for something that you basically had to make a case that this money would enhance your future. So It would give you an experience that would enhance your future or give you better career opportunities. So I actually applied to do this production. No one had ever done anything like that before. Again, it was mostly like, I want to do a semester abroad, and they would fund that. So I applied to do this production, made this case, like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to have a theater company, and I'm working on doing this production. It's really expensive, and I applied for money for that. And I remember I had to get a signature from my academic advisor. And at the time, when I first entered school, I always knew I wanted to have a dual degree, a business degree and a theater degree, because obviously with what I'm doing, they go hand in hand.
Right. The stars align.
Yes. But when I first entered, I had to pick one or the other to enter with, and then in my second semester, I could talk about adding the other degree. So I picked theater to start, and so my academic advisor was theater advisor. And I emailed him, I explained the situation, explained why it would be helpful to me, and that I needed his signature. And he was basically like, great, come down to my office at this time, and we'll look over it. Awesome. And I go down to his office, and I was so caught off guard, because he basically told me I wasn't going to be able to succeed in this, that I didn't know what I was doing, that he had run a theater group in England, and you have to advertise by mail. And did I know you have to advertise by mail if you're going to be successful? And what happens when your venue falls through? How are you going to handle that? How are you going to be able to move in your set? How are you going to be able to do all these things? And first of all, I explained all this to him through email, and he seemed really chill about it. So I wasn't anticipating this type of conversation. I thought, oh, he's just going to sign this paper, and then I can put in my application.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so caught off guard, and I remember telling him, like, well, even if I fail, this is a learning opportunity, and the whole reason I'm applying for this money is for a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for me to succeed. It's,
right.
Normally people use this money to study abroad. They're not expected to get that money back. It's not that I have to get all this money in ticket sales. And he refused to sign the paper because he insisted that I was going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I even said before I left, I was like, I appreciate your feedback, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I was proud of myself because I was very flustered, but I didn't cry in his office. Now, I went to the bathroom afterwards and cried, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry, which I was happy with. And I remember calling my mom just in tears, like, he won't sign the paper, I don't know what to do, he doesn't believe in me, blah, blah, blah. And which, by the way, very disheartening to have your academic advisor not believe in you. Mm-hmm. So she basically said, go back to the honors college, tell them what happened, see what they said.
Mm-hmm.
So I did just that, and they were basically like, yeah, we're going to find a way to get the paper signed for you. We see the value in this, and we're sorry that happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
So they got the paper signed, and I didn't get as much money as I requested, but I did get some money. And again, that was huge.
Makes a difference.
Greece in total ended up being about $14,000 to produce. Mm-hmm. And again, I was 18. I did not have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So I was relying on
an extra $14,000 lying around.
I was relying on making that up in ticket sales.
Sure.
And we didn't make $14,000 in ticket sales. So I'm very grateful that, I had that donation from my grandparents and I had that grant money because I was still in the hole.
Yeah.
And if I ever wanted to do this again, I needed money. I needed capital. So it worked out in a way that I was happy with, but it was definitely, that experience with my academic advisor was probably the first of many times since then that I've been told, no, you can't do this. And luckily, I was very passionate about what I wanted to do, and I didn't let that stop me because you see where we are now, and that would have been so unfortunate if I just quit because he said he didn't believe in me.
Yeah. I have two questions for you about that story, which I have never heard before, and I had no idea that had happened.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I guess my first question is, have you ever used mailers at all to sell tickets? Oh, no. Okay. So,
it is a
point
very
taken.
Expensive way of advertising, and we have not used it.
Mm-hmm. And do you send a ticket to that person every single time that you do a show?
I don't.
Because you should.
But I feel like we should start.
Yes.
And he did say, after Greece was over, I was in class with him, and he asked me in front of the whole class how it went, and I told him it went really well. And he did admit that he was wrong, but also, at that point, I was like, too little, too late, dude. The bare minimum you can do as a professor and as a mentor is believe in your students. Bare minimum.
Yeah.
And I try to give that back to people we work with today is just, if they say they want to direct or they want to figure out how to run sound or whatever, I do my best to support them. And there are certain constraints with that, of course. And people kind of have to show that they're reliable and that they're passionate about it before we put them in a leadership position. Mm-hmm. But we've had a 14-year-old running our soundboard before. Mm-hmm. And you know what? They were awesome. Mm-hmm. And you can't just go to other community theaters at that age and be like, yeah, I want to run your sound.
Right.
It doesn't usually happen. And that was another reason why I decided to do this is I wanted to direct. I didn't want to perform. Mm-hmm. And I was 18, a young woman, and I was like, who is going to give me this opportunity?
Yeah.
And I really felt like, I'll never know. Maybe there was a group out there that would have been like, yeah, come on in, do this. Mm-hmm. But I kind of doubt it.
Right.
And I felt like I really had to create the opportunity for myself.
Absolutely. There's two philosophies there that I really like. The first one being, when I first heard that you were creating a company, there was no like thought in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, yeah, Miranda's creating a theater company. I'm like, yeah, of course. There's nobody else that I could think of off the top of my head that would just be able to say that, and it would happen. Of course it's going to happen. But that also, I know, was the first of what would go on to be many times of people trying to say no, or people closing doors and, shutting down opportunities. And, he gave you kind of that list of like things to, what are you going to do when this happens? Or what are you going to do when you lose a venue? Or what are you going to do when, ticket sales don't go your way? And, hearing that story and thinking about where we've been over the last several years, I'm like, you've navigated through a pandemic. You've navigated through uncharted territory on more than one occasion, and have always found a way to make it work. And honestly, that's the name of the game. It's, finding ways to make it work, finding ways to sell the tickets, finding ways to engage your audience and to tell these stories and to do this work. And it's just, it's not easy, but you've always managed to find a way, and that's very impressive. So kudos to you. I know I don't say it enough, but yes, it's just it's impressive, and just the amount of time that goes into it is really, really it's awe-inspiring to watch. So
well, and sometimes you do fail, or even now we've been doing this for almost 10 years. Sometimes we don't hit our ticket target, or certain elements of the production aren't where we want them to be. It's live theater, and that happens all the time. But I do feel like learning along the way and those failures have made us so much better at what we do.
Yes.
And that's part of what I love about our team is we use almost every setback as an opportunity to get better. We'll have a setback, we'll talk about it, we'll be like, wow, what happened there, and how do we make sure that never happens again? And I feel like we've become a very resilient group, and we'll talk about this more as we go into like our experience with other companies and other venues and how that went, but we've had a lot of things thrown at us.
Yeah.
And we've always found a way to make it work. And does it suck when the venue bails on you? Yeah. Does it suck when there's a snowstorm? Yeah. But you can't plan for everything. You just have to be really good at planning on the fly. And I feel like that's something we've gotten really good at.
We've really stuck to that focus. I know something you and I have said a lot over the last several years is that, we're in this to create good theater and to give people opportunities. And I know that was something that I was drawn to when you first started with the company, because I knew how you felt about theater. And it's still something that we stick to this day of like, that's what we're here for. We're here to tell good stories, to give people opportunities to make theater magic, and to just enjoy working together and, creating together. And I think that has really carried us through a lot of those really tough times of, where do we, sometimes we need to go back to the drawing board with certain things, but we go back with that same mindset and play, and we've managed to just keep navigating those waters. So.
Right. And it's still, for the record, it still hurts when people are like, nah, or you can't do that or whatever. But to some extent, you get used to letting the narrative come from yourself and your community rather than all the other noise.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, like I said, still struggle with it. We'll probably continue to struggle with it, but it's something that I've learned along the way, which is there's always going to be someone that has an opinion about what you're doing and who you are, and you just have to remember why you're doing it. And that's the thing I always go back to is, why am I doing this? I'm doing it to create art. I'm doing it to give back to my community. I'm doing it to create a safe place for performers and crew members. And I'm doing it to be with my friends, and all of those things matter way more than someone being like, oh, well, my production was better than yours, or whatever their nasty opinion might
Sure,
be.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it's not a game from that standpoint, you know. We're not doing it for the brownie points. We're not doing it to, one up. We're here to do what we're doing. We're here to tell stories and to make great art that people enjoy.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's been working for us thus far, so we'll just keep rolling with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot more Grease to talk about, and I think
Yeah.
we're going to have to save some of it for our next episode. But
Absolutely.
next time we meet, we're going to talk all things Grease auditions.
Oh.
And I can't wait to share all of the tea about my first ever round of auditions with Small Town Stars.
I can't wait to hear those stories.
Oh, yeah. It's a good one. So stay tuned. But thank you, Snarkies, for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us, and tune in for our next episode. More shows, more gossip, more tea on the way.
All right, we're going to spill it all. Have a good
Yes.
one. And that's a wrap. Thanks for getting snarky with us. We'll see you later.
See you next time.